Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever found yourself wide awake, staring at a glowing screen in the absolute dead of night, desperately searching for answers after a relationship has ended, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're literally breaking down the anatomy of a broken heart. We're going to use the actual data and the real stories that define this shared human experience. We're diving deep into the most common regrets we all face, and more importantly, we'll see exactly how the science of psychology tells us we can actually heal from them.
So be honest with me for a second. Have you been there, just doom scrolling through Reddit forums at 2 a.m. reading the stories of absolute strangers about their heartbreak? When we do that, we aren't just looking for entertainment, are we? We're looking for proof. Proof that we are not the only ones who feel this intense, overwhelming way. And looking at the research, I want to assure you right now, you have every single reason to feel that way, and you are absolutely not alone.
To really understand this, we need to look at the data. Section 1, the universal pain of regret.
Now, what's truly wild is exactly how much this romantic regret totally dominates our mental real estate. When researchers compare the intensity of human regrets, looking at things like career choices or family dynamics, romantic regret shoots right to the top. Studies actually prove that regret over romantic relationships isn't just common, it's significantly more intense and more frequent than regret over literally any other area of life.
And that brings us to a super crucial strategy. The most powerful thing we can do for our pain is to name it. We're going to name these specific, highly common regrets today because, seeing our deepest, most embarrassing pain laid out clearly by someone else allows us to take a breath and think, thank goodness it's not just me. Talking about it makes it real, it makes it a shared human experience, and it strips away that incredibly heavy burden of personal failure.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 2, 10 common breakup regrets.
We're going to do a rapid-fire look at the top 10 most common post-breakup feelings based on community stories and psychological research. Let's start with the first 3. Number 1 is arguably the most common, staying way too long. You know it would have been better to leave ages ago, but you wasted huge amounts of time on a situation that just wasn't healthy. It's exactly like renting a terrible movie, but instead of just turning it off, you sit there for 6 more hours just hoping it gets better. Spoiler alert, it never does. Number 2 is not trusting your gut, ignoring that little voice that said something was off just because the relationship felt good in the moment. And number 3 is regretting how you let it end. The horrible things said, the text you can never take back, or maybe that cowardly ghosting act where you really wish you could have a do-over just to be a better person in those final moments.
And going back to not trusting your gut for a second. Less like flags and more like a 5-alarm fire with a marching band playing Get Out Now. I mean, seriously, in hindsight, the red flags we ignored weren't subtle little flags at all. We just actively choose to put in earplugs because we're so incredibly desperate for it to work.
Then we move to regret number 4, not fighting for them. Man, this is the quiet, haunting one. The research points out that individuals who didn't initiate the breakup and who didn't expect it to end report significantly higher levels of distress and trauma. Why? Because they are completely haunted by the what-ifs. You'll look back and just torture yourself wondering, if you just tried a little bit harder, would things be different?
So a crucial point here is comparing our internal compromises to our external ones. Regret number 5 is losing yourself. You changed your hobbies, your style, your friends, essentially becoming a supporting character in someone else's movie. And when filming is over, you don't even know what your own story is about anymore. Now, contrast that with regret number 6, the things you said yes to. These are the permanent reminders of temporary feelings, moving to a city you hated, taking on their debt, or maybe getting a matching dolphin tattoo that now looks like a depressed potato. You end up paying a very real price for a decision made by a version of you that was completely drunk on love.
Moving right along, we have 7, 8, and 9. Number 7 is taking emotional intimacy for granted. Relationship psychologists actually note this is what men tend to miss the absolute most. You thought they'd always be there, so you held back, and now the silence is totally deafening. Number 8 is letting them isolate you. They slowly chipped away at your friendships, and now you have to send those cringe-inducing, hey, long time no see texts to your old best friend, just hoping they'll take you back. And number 9 is the infamous revenge phase. The desperate hookups, the highly curated social media posts, perfectly designed to show them exactly what they're missing.
But that post-breakup revenge phase, it feels like a massive victory in the moment, but ultimately it's incredibly empty. Performing a one-person show for an audience that isn't even watching anymore, that captures it perfectly. It just leaves you feeling completely unfulfilled.
Now, what's really interesting about this next point is the sheer volume it represents. When we talk about who hurts after a breakup, we almost always assume it's the person who was dumped. But studies actually show that a massive 40 to 50% of people who end the relationship experience notable emotional turmoil and regret within that first year.
Which brings us to our final regret, number 10, dumper's remorse. It's controversial, for sure, but psychological research confirms it is very, very real. People who initiate breakups often feel intense guilt and regret right alongside the relief. They thought they wanted freedom, but it turned out that the freedom they sought was actually just incredibly lonely. Okay, reading a list like that can feel a bit like picking at a scab. It validates the pain, sure, but let's pivot to the solution phase. Section 3, the psychology of healing. What can we actually do when the regret is a fact and the past simply cannot be changed?
Psychology gives us 3 absolutely crucial phases for processing this grief and taking back your personal narrative. First, we have to treat regret as data. Second, we have to aggressively practice self-compassion. And finally, we have to reframe the entire experience. Let's break these down.
Step 1. You really have to stop treating regret like a life sentence. Regret is not a punishment. It's your brain's brutally honest feedback report. It simply shows you what you value, what you actually need, and what you will absolutely never ever do again. You shouldn't beat yourself up for the mistakes. Actually, scratch that. You should thank your past self for the lesson, no matter how ridiculously expensive the tuition was.
Step 2 is self-compassion. And listen, it is backed by literal science. Enter the fading affect bias. This is a psychological coping mechanism where the emotions tied to negative events actually fade faster than positive ones. Your brain is quite literally designed to help you heal, but you have to let it. You've got to show yourself some compassion because, yeah, hindsight is 20/20, but you are making those past decisions in a thick fog of love, hope, and fear. Step 3 is to reframe it. Look, you cannot change the past, but you absolutely have the power to change its meaning. Let's look at how reframing works. You might look back and see wasted time, but reframed, that time was actually an education. That lost identity you keep mourning, it wasn't actually lost, it was just shed like snakeskin so that you could grow. The pain of the breakup is simply the ultimate price of an invaluable lesson, and that lesson is that you are so much stronger than you think. Which brings us to Section 4, writing your next chapter. I really want to give you some literal light at the end of the tunnel here. When you're in the thick of it, it feels like the pain is going to last forever, but the data tells a wonderfully encouraging story. If all else fails, rely on this incredibly hopeful statistic. 71% of people start feeling significantly better around the 11-week mark. That's a massive majority finding real relief in under 3 months. So, if we map that out, day 1 is the breakup, the absolute bottom. But by week 11, the fog is lifting and you start feeling better. You just have to hang in there because the data shows that true closure very, very often comes knocking within just 3 months. Your story is so far from over.
Regret is just the end of one chapter. It just marks the close of something that wasn't meant to be your forever. The pen is in your hand now. You've got the data, you have the lessons, and your brain is already working to heal you. So the only question left is, what will you write next? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. I really hope it gave you the clarity and the structure you need to keep moving forward. Take care of yourselves out there.